Molly here. Today is the day we've all been waiting for. This is where we review and discuss the first 2 episodes of Starfleet Academy. And it's pretty much what we anticipated it would be. So, let's just get on with it. First, I'll do the recap of both episodes, then the review will follow. There will be bookmarks where you can skip past the recap if you want to. But I do say a few funny things, so you might want to just listen to that anyway. So here we go. Starfleet Academy. Season 1, Episode 1. Kids These Days. The series begins with She-Hulk talking to her son, 6-year-old Caleb. Apparently, She-Hulk was getting food for her son from Taserface, and she had no idea he wasn't getting the food from a magical food bank, and was actually a pirate. One of his jobs had gone bad, and Taserface killed a Federation officer, so Taserface and She-Hulk are now going to a penal colony and a rehabilitation camp, respectively. Holly Hunter, Captain Aki, or Ake, whatever. Anyway, Raising Arizona was the judge at the very bizarre sentencing, and she was comforting little Caleb after his mom was dragged off while shouting, "Don't trust them." Captain Aki gets tricked by a 6-year-old who steals her comm badge and then escapes. 15 years go by, and we catch up with little Caleb, and he's now 21 with quite the rap sheet. He's still looking for his mom, and he's going to prison. Meanwhile, on Bajor, Admiral Mummy Guy visits former Captain Aki, who quit after separating Caleb and his felon mommy. It's established that former Captain Aki is 422 years old and is now a teacher. Admiral Mummy Guy tells former Captain Aki that they are recommissioning Starfleet Academy, and he wants her to be the new chancellor. He tells her these kids are inheriting a broken world they did not create, but have to clean up. Being part Lanthanite and able to remember the Federation as it was before the burn, there was no one better suited than she is to help these kids. She says no until Admiral Mummy Guy tells her that they've found Caleb, who former Captain Aki has been trying to find for the last 15 years. So she agrees to become Starfleet Academy's new chancellor, and she goes and gets Caleb from the Tarothan prison, where he's being held. She tells Caleb she's spent the last 15 years trying to find him. She then tells him Taroth signed a treaty with the Federation, allowing low-level offenders to commute rehabilitation sentences into service, and she asks Caleb to come with her to Starfleet Academy. Chancellor Aki then tells Caleb his mother broke out of prison a year ago, and she will help him find her. So they go to the Starfleet Academy ship, the Athena, and it's all downhill from there. Basically, Caleb begrudgingly makes a friend. We meet the faculty and other students. Caleb hacks the comms to send a message to his mom, but Taserface intercepts it and attacks the school. We get that awful scene where he and Aki have their little showdown on the bridge. Caleb and the other students manage to disable the programmable matter Taserface used to attack the Athena. Taserface's ship gets destroyed, but he manages to get away in an escape pod, but not before messing with Caleb's head about his mom. And in lieu of expulsion, Caleb gets restricted to campus for 90 days and a bunch of community service. The end. So that brings us to Starfleet Academy Season 1, Episode 2, Beta Test. This episode begins with Chancellor Raising Arizona telling the students to make their beds and get to class on time. In xenobiology, they all get issued jars of mucus to care for. Whatever. Jet Reno's class is the most boring. The Jem'Hadar Klingon makes a student cry and run away. This episode is supposed to have a comedic aspect to it, but falls pretty flat. The Federation is trying to get Beta Z to rejoin the Federation, so they're having the negotiations at Starfleet Academy. While trying to run away after a confrontation with Jet Reno, Caleb meets Tarama Sadal, the daughter of the Beta Z president. They hit it off. She wants Caleb to give her a tour of Starfleet Academy. On the tour, Tarima says she wants to see a humpback whale. Caleb tells her he wants to find an inaccessible planet. They go to the stellar cartography lab and Caleb tries to locate Goja 5, but it isn't in the Federation database. Tarima pulls up the Beta Z database and locates the planet. It's behind Beta Z's psionic wall, whatever the hell that is. Apparently, it was established after the burn, so that's why it's not in the Federation star charts. Negotiation stuff happens, but nothing really happens. Caleb takes Tarima to see some whales. They're about to kiss when they're found. For some reason, Caleb's in trouble, which I didn't understand, but maybe I zoned out during that part. I don't know, doesn't matter. The next day, Tarima visits the War College. Then she sees Caleb afterward. He asks about the device on her neck. She says she feels things more than other Betazoids, and if she has a meltdown, other people get hurt. Caleb tells her that doesn't scare him. Tarima asks Caleb why it's so hard for him to be honest and direct, and he tells her it's because he spent a lot of time just surviving. And now there are all these rules. Tarima says rules make her feel safe. And Caleb says his mom made him feel safe, but she got taken away. And she's why he's looking for Goja 5, and she might be there. And he hasn't seen her since he was 6. And Tarima has the nerve to take this honest opening up and throw it in Caleb's face, and says, "That's why you care about Beta Z lowering its wall? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't keep anything from you." And he tells her he didn't know his traumatic childhood was part of the tour. And she accuses him of using her the whole time. She thought he liked her, and not that he wanted to manipulate her, which you'd think a Betazoid of all people would be able to tell the difference, so this was forced and stupid. Negotiations are going poorly, and the Beta Z delegation has decided to leave. Chancellor Aki goes to see Caleb in his quarters. They talk. He says something about how in physics, there's always something you can build. Aki tells Caleb he's a genius. So the Betazoids are leaving, and Caleb runs after Tamira and apologizes to her and asks her to convince her dad to give the Federation one more chance. She does, and Chancellor Aki offers to move the Federation headquarters to Beta Z, and the Betazoids agree to rejoin the Federation. Tamira decides to stay and attend the War College, while her brother, Occam, chooses Starfleet Academy and becomes Caleb and Darum's new roommate. The end. Well, there were about 20 minutes of, what was this, like 2.5 hours of footage here, of show. About 20 minutes in the first episode that actually had potential. After that first part where they had that stupid hearing and his mom gets taken away and Caleb escapes. After that, when Admiral Vance visits Aki on Bajor, that was actually interesting. However, there was a bunch of poison pill stuff in there about separating children from their families, and it felt so preachy about current politics, but current politics from like 3 years ago. So it was really out of date even for that. When she found Caleb in that jail, in the prison, that wasn't too bad either. Some of this stuff was actually, I thought maybe this there might be something there. But as soon as they started heading for the Athena, it all fell apart. It is just typical of how they write. They have a premise, they have a few good elements that they really could have made something out of, but then, like, 15 to 20 minutes in, it usually falls apart and the whole rest of the thing is awful. I don't know why they can't stick the landing. It's like they've got all these mystery boxes, but then the mystery boxes are all full of garbage. This was no different. However, I would say I thought this was better than Section 31. In fact, I liked this better than Discovery, but anybody who's been in this channel before knows that that bar is so low, you got to dig a hole to get to it in the first place. So, while still not good, it was better than that stuff. It really felt like those shows you see for young teens and tweens on the Disney Channel. That's what this felt like. It also felt to me like this would be the Starfleet Academy that would produce the characters that would be on Lower Decks. Like, this is where you would get Mariner and Boimler going through Starfleet Academy. The jokey things that were happening in the second episode, that's what this felt like. Because they really weren't taking it seriously. And it was very weird because some of the stuff was serious, but then other stuff wasn't. It makes it hard to watch things like that because it's got you off balance the whole time. Like, what is this supposed to be? Do they even know what this is supposed to be? What are they trying to be? I don't know.
I agree with you that this was definitely better than Section 31, but Section 31 was the worst thing I've seen in the 21st century. Easily. So that's not saying much. With it being worse than Discovery, I need to see a few more episodes to guarantee that, but these first 2 episodes are better than Star Trek Discovery, that's for sure.
I would compare this to the first 2 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, and this was definitely better. These first 2 episodes were definitely better than those first 2 episodes. For starters, they didn't commit any war crimes in these 2 episodes, which for these guys, these writers, that's actually really good.
Even though Raising Arizona was treating the Caleb separation, because I agree with you, this was allegory for events happening a few years ago when it came to U.S. immigration detention and all that news about families being separated.
I think that's what they were trying to go for there.
And they just can't help putting politics into this stuff, modern day politics. Without giving this series too much credit, I have to say up front, did this feel like Star Trek? No. But that first episode, it also had some jokey bits that didn't work. But the serious parts that they were doing, I was actually going, this is better than I was expecting. When they were hitting between Raising Arizona and Caleb, there were a few scenes at the beginning of the episode when she was picking him up from the prison, and then at the very end when she was talking to him about staying around Starfleet and seeing if they can make a better future. There were moments there when they were treating it seriously that I was actually saying this could turn into something decent.
A lot like with Christina Chong on Strange New Worlds. I really feel like the actor that plays Caleb, he might actually have a career ahead of him. Because given what he had to work with, he did an outstanding job.
And Holly Hunter, when she was in the quieter scenes, you could tell she was still a decent actress. It's when she was hamming it up with all that bridge crap is where you just rolled your eyes and said, this is horrible.
Yeah, the barefoot stuff and the curling up in the captain's chair and just all the weird quirky stuff. They don't know how to write quirky. Because this all comes down to the writing at the end of the day. All of it. Like, all the problems are the writing. Well, alright, not exclusively, because I'll just say this. The Jet Reno character has never worked for me, and I think that there's a problem there beyond just the writing, but I'm not going to go into that too far.
What I don't understand is I believe Tig Notaro is supposed to be a comedian. I think. I've never seen her, but I think she's a comedian. Supposedly, the lady who played the Jem'Hadar is a comedian. But how can those characters have such horrible comedic timing?
Well, again, it comes back to, is this a writing problem? Because you could have the best comedian and, you give them crap work, and if the script is garbage, they may not be able to pull it off. I don't know. But it's not good. It's not working out, really.
In fact, all of the jokes that they put into this fell flat. They were cringy. Really bad cringe. Not kind of cringy, like really bad cringy. But at the beginning of the first episode, if they just would have taken the material seriously all the way through, maybe they could have done something here. Like maybe. I'm not guaranteeing, but maybe. But how many times have we said this? Strange New Worlds, one of my biggest complaints that we've said on this channel, is they almost are embarrassed to tell a Star Trek story. Like they'll start out telling a Star Trek story. There's been several episodes where halfway in, Molly and I look at each other and go, you know what? This is not too bad. And then they can't stick the landing ever. Like ever. It's like they're embarrassed to tell a Star Trek story. So in that second half, they'll undercut it with jokes or just diminish the whole weight of the episode. And so if they're not going to take it seriously, I'm not going to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And I know the Orville was so successful, and I got to think Kurtzman, that burned him really badly because a lot of people were warming up to the Orville a lot more than Star Trek Discovery. And so what he decided to do from Strange New Worlds on, because in later Discovery they tried to add this comedic stuff as well, Alex Kurtzman and his people have no ability to write comedy at all.
Which is weird because he used to work on comedic shows. Jack of All Trades was one of them. Hercules and Xena were two more. What the hell happened?
I don't know. Because that Jem Hadar character is horrible. I know a lot of people like him as an actor, but Paul Giamatti was super cringe every moment he was on camera.
It was horrible.
It was super horrible. It was like, remember in Picard Season 3, the Amanda Plummer character, the penguin character, how hammy and cheesy that was? This was worse than that. And I haven't seen Paul in anything, but I appreciate people have said in their comments before, he's a decent actor. I'm willing to grant that. But I didn't see a decent actor on the screen in episode 1.
Unless he was told to be a total ham, which is entirely possible because they've put that tic-tac-toe board on the side of his head, like shaved into his head. What is up with that? Again, it's like discount Taserface, which is why I call him Taserface.
It was horrible. He wasn't even necessary for the story. I was telling Molly, episode 1 should have been her picking up Caleb, her getting him in the academy getting up and running. Maybe we see them in San Francisco. You start to see some classes in the beginning of the semester. And pretty much that should be it. Maybe end the same way it did in this episode. That would have established your universe. You didn't need Paul Giamatti's character this early. I mean, I don't think you need him at all. But I guess he ties in to She-Hulk disappearing. At least it was a tie back in the day. So they're going to drag him in. But I don't want to see Paul Giamatti's character again. It was so painful to watch him.
It makes no sense as to why his mom was even working with that guy. Why was he giving her food? She said at the beginning she didn't know what he was doing, that he was a pirate. She must have, because otherwise, what was he getting out of that deal of giving her food?
I mean, I'm guessing some sort of relationship Weinstein-y thing.
Ew. But it just, that made no sense. It really made no sense. And acting like she was just a victim in this whole thing, like she had no responsibility in what happened to that Federation pilot that got killed. I mean, she must have been there when he was pirating.
Well, you know what that character reminded me of? Remember The Expanse? And remember Naomi and her background and her ex that she had a child with? And it reminded me of that, like, hey, let's take that Expanse background and let's really crap it up and let's make it for this series.
Well, it also felt like it ripped off some of Prodigy.
To me, what this series feels like so far is if you take Lower Decks and Prodigy and you smoosh them together. That's what this series is. It's
a live-action version of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the comedy that would work in an animated series is not going to work the same way in a live-action series. It never will. It just doesn't. So they try to be serious in some places, and they try to bring the comedy in, and it just falls flat. It doesn't work.
Well, this show, the more it was going on, the more I was asking myself, this story with Caleb so far, it sort of feels like the Prodigy story in season 1 at least. And now that they introduced this princess or whatever she is,
Betazoid,
is that going to be like that character in Prodigy? Remember the one, the warrior princess as well?
Yeah.
It just feels like this is just...
Like, they can't write anything original. All they can do is take other things and mush them together, and here's your mashup, there you go. New show. But it's not. It's just a Frankenstein together pieces of other things. It turns out to be a monster.
And Robert Picardo. Oh my gosh. They had him doing this check-in, which I think people have seen on YouTube, the trailer for this, where he's checking people in, and he's doing like medical scans on them. And like this one girl says she might have accidentally eaten her comm badge she doesn't remember.
He was vaccinating all those incoming students.
Okay.
So there's some more social commentary for you.
And then in episode 2, there was this cringy background that lasted forever where he was doing this opera with some alien. And it was going on for minutes and minutes and minutes in the background while other characters were talking at like this reception or something.
It was, yes, they were having that discussion about the negotiations about Beta Z rejoining the Federation, and I think the opera in the background was supposed to mirror the tension that was going on in the negotiation conversation. However, it just came off as very pretentious.
It was definitely pretentious.
Yes, and it was very distracting too. And I think they were trying to do something that was a little bit more meaningful than it came off. Actually, probably a lot more. But it didn't work. But this is the kind of thing I expect from them now. It kind of reminded me of that Klingon K-pop stuff that they had on Strange New Worlds. It's just, like, they can't help themselves. And I don't know who they're writing this for, but it just... I mean, maybe it's just they want that Glee-loving, High School Musical-watching Disney Channel group of people. Maybe that's who they're aiming for, and they don't want anybody else watching this. Because this doesn't appeal to me. It didn't appeal to you. I can't see how this would appeal to traditional Star Trek viewers. Especially since last week we posted that clips video comparing the experience of Wesley Crusher and Nog as far as their journey into Starfleet Academy. This was very different from that test that Wesley Crusher had to undergo to get in. And yes, this is the first class coming back after the burn, but my god, this was really bad. This is what they're starting out with? But then you find out that they also have the War College, and so what is this, some sort of remedial school for the F-ups?
Speaking of F-ups, all the contemporary language they were using in this, I think there was like 2 holes.
I'm gonna have to bleep all of that, you know.
Well, yeah.
We can't give a list of what they said because otherwise we'll get demonetized. But yes, there was a lot of swearing. There was a lot of bruh. There was a lot of bro. Just a lot of...
Dude. I remember dude being said once.
Yeah, I don't even think the kiddies these days say dude.
Caleb flipped off somebody in his chair.
Oh, yeah, that happened too. And I can remember when Starfleet Academy... Like, when I was in college back in the 90s, like, you would see people driving around town in a college town with Starfleet Academy stickers on the back of their car. You know, and these were, dare I say, nerdy people. I can't think of a better way to describe us. It's just what we were. This is not the Starfleet Academy we all dreamed of attending. This is not. This is, I don't know what this is, but this is not. Like, you tell me 21-year-olds are behaving the way that these kids do? And these kids, my god, they show up to school and they swallow their own comm badge, like, on the first day?
I was going with the premise here, because I'm like, okay, this isn't Star Trek. Comparing it to the Starfleet Academy that we had in the 90s, in narrative, if we're talking Discovery, the story difference is, whether we like it or not, let's just go with what they told us. This burn thing happened. When the burn thing happened, they lost the ability to travel faster than light to other star systems. So each planet was separated from other planets. The assumption here is that the Starfleet Academy they're rebuilding, they're trying to get numbers back into Starfleet. So maybe they lowered their requirements to get into Starfleet Academy. But then during that second episode, the Betazoid leader, he was asking questions like, there's supposed to be all these requirements to get in. What, did you just waive those things? No, they're still there. Caleb passed with a 90-some percentile in the back of a shuttlecraft. Because, you know, he's a super genius. Because, of course, he's a super genius.
Of course he is.
So, supposedly, criteria is still in place. So that girl who thinks that she swallowed her comm badge, that's the best of the best?
She's a super genius. I'll tell you what. 11-year-olds showing up to Hogwarts for the first time are more mature than these 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
This was pathetic.
But we knew, based on the trailers, that's what we were going to get.
Yeah.
The disappointing part was in that episode 1 that there was things there that because you mentioned a few minutes ago, well, this wasn't made for you, meaning me. After that first episode, I wasn't sure yet. I was 50-50 going, well, wait, there were some pieces here that I could probably hang on to if Holly Hunter's Raising Arizona character, if her and Caleb were going to have these exchanges once in a while. In episode 1, Caleb was actually pretty mature for what he'd been through.
Yeah.
I was not disliking Caleb. I was actually liking him a little bit. And when Holly Hunter's character wasn't on the bridge being foolish, I was kind of liking her character. But episode 2 completely flushed that all down the toilet. And episode 2 gave me exactly what I was expecting based on the trailers. And I have a feeling the rest of the series is going to be just like episode 2.
Yeah.
This was disappointing, but I probably shouldn't have been. I had very low expectations, but episode 1 gave me a moment's pause to go, well, wait a minute, maybe I was jumping in with some expectations here that I unfairly put on the show.
And can anybody explain to me why the Betazoids are using sign language? Like, I didn't understand it at all. Because at first I was kind of like, okay, well, maybe because they're behind their psionic wall, maybe they haven't been speaking at all. Maybe they've just been communicating telepathically this whole time. So their speech has been degraded over the last 100 and whatever years. But then I saw them communicating with each other using sign language. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, and maybe the inhibitor on, Tamira or whatever her name is, maybe that prevents her from being able to use telepathy. I don't know. But at the same time, then, why is her father communicating with her brother using sign language? It made no sense to me.
And I don't understand, speaking of Tamara, or whatever her name is, why was she mad at Caleb? There was a part in episode 2 where it was revealed that supposedly Caleb was using her to get this planet knowledge. And I'm thinking back on what happened earlier in the episode. Caleb was going to jump the wall. Tamara's the one that approached him and was talking to him. And then later, when there was going to be a tour of Starfleet, she specifically went out of her way to say, I want Caleb. And then when Caleb went into the stellar cartography lab and said, look, I can't find the planet, it was Tamara that volunteered her map to show where the planet was. And then in that argument she was having, Tamara, she was saying something like, well, you were just using this so the Federation would open up our walls or whatever. And speaking of walls, I'm wondering if that's a reference to something, but I'm not going to get into that. And they built a wall around their planet because they wanted to be safe. But I don't even understand. Caleb, as far as I can tell, did nothing wrong. And then when he opened up to her, she behaved like a horrible creature.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really bad.
Again, in the comments, somebody explain what Caleb did. I get the Federation might have wanted to wedge their way in some way, but Caleb himself did nothing wrong that I can tell in that whole setup.
No.
She approached every single time with help.
Well, again, that's that poor writing. They needed to come up with some falling out between the two, and apparently they couldn't think of anything better than that. And she comes off looking like a horrible bitch. That's terrible writing right there.
And the actor who plays Caleb, I wish I remembered his name, but I don't, his actor's name. That guy is in decent physical shape. So why didn't they cast him to be the Klingon? He looked like a Klingon. He had the body build of a Klingon.
Well, and at the beginning, he's dropped. He's told to do push-ups because he was misbehaving when he first got to the academy. And he's having trouble doing those push-ups. Yeah, there was a bag set on his back. But looking at the physical condition he was in, that shouldn't have been a problem. He should have been able to just, punch those out and been done with it.
That dude's arms look like a bodybuilder's arms. Yeah. I mean, he has huge arms.
Yeah. This kid clearly works out. So that was a ridiculous scene. That kid should have been able to do his push-ups no problem.
There's very little that I can actually think about in a positive way outside of episode 1, Caleb and Raising Arizona. The Jem'Hadar lady, I disliked every time she was on the screen. The whole time I disliked her. She's annoying. She reminds me kind of if Jet Reno and Tilly had a baby or something, that would be this character. Just that sort of, I just dislike whenever she's on the screen. I didn't like her at all. And then there were things like when she got impaled on something and they were doing some sort of surgery on her, and then they pulled it out, and all this white stuff glopped out, and it's like, is that her blood? Because we know Klingon's blood isn't white. because in Star Trek 6, we've seen Klingon blood, and that white stuff that they used for the
Tetracell white, yeah.
That was a chemical to keep them addicted. That wasn't their blood.
Yeah, that was weird.
But, I mean, maybe... I haven't watched Deep Space Nine in a long time, because I think the channel knows I'm not a big fan of Deep Space Nine. Maybe I missed it. Maybe their blood is white, but I thought that was the chemical that they were jammed into them to keep them addicted so that they would follow what the founders wanted.
Yeah, that's what I thought, too.
So I didn't understand that. I didn't understand when they brought back the doctor, Picardo's doctor character, and he was doing something, and then he got that fixed, and then these kids are doing surgery on the Jem'Hadar lady, and it's like, why don't you take Picardo's doctor into that med lab and fix up that Jem'Hadar lady instead of trying to talk that Klingon kid through it? I didn't understand that.
Because they needed that Klingon, the Jaden, they needed Jaden to get in touch with his healing side and get some confidence and to bring all these kids together. Again, it was more forced drama, which is why I just skipped over it. Because this was forced drama in order to bring these children together. And by children, I mean 21-year-olds. And that forced drama that they used to bring those children together, that's the hallmark of bad writing. Like, they couldn't think of some other way to bring those kids together and to give them confidence and stuff. And again, it happened so early on in this episode that it just the pacing was so bad. It just felt so wrong.
Well, what about that Tig Notaro lecture? She was teaching a physics class or something, and Caleb was sitting there not being very interested and just kind of lipping off, and then Tig Notaro was like, oh, you're bored of what I'm saying? Yeah, there's nothing you can teach me that I don't already... Like, really? That's really how all these people will behave, huh? Okay.
The Jem'Hadar Klingon hybrid, she was yelling, and she made that one cadet run off crying, and then she was satisfied with herself afterward. I can always spot the runner.
And that reminded me of from The Water Boy. Remember when they were going to do that kickoff, and the guy was looking down the different players, and he saw the one player that was like shaking real bad, and he goes,
yeah, there's my bitch.
And that's what this reminded me of when she did that.
Yeah, not cool. For a group that supposedly is so anti-bullying, there was a lot of bullying in this. A lot of really bad behavior. And I'm not saying that doesn't belong in, like, these teeny bopper dramas, and I just dated myself by calling them teeny boppers. It was certainly not what we would have gotten if they'd made Starfleet Academy back in the 90s, when Wesley Crusher and Nog would have gone.
Well, it's interesting because when Caleb, later when he met with Raising Arizona, and he was talking about his mom, how his mom was like a genius or something. And it reminded me of when
Nog
was explaining to Cisco how his dad was a genius, but he never got a chance to do anything with it. And so he wanted a chance. It just seemed like that was
ripped right out of there.
Yeah.
That's why I said this, to me, feels like a Frankenstein's monster of pieces taken from other series.
Well, they had the humpback whales, which was a callback to The Voyage Home. You know, she even said, you know that whale's pregnant, just like Spock did in that movie. There were all these just Easter eggs just jammed in there for jamming in sake. And then it's weird because they're in this 33rd century, whatever it is, and they've got all this programmable matter and personal transports, and they still had people with glasses. It wasn't just Holly Hunter's character in that
mucus lab.
Yeah, in that xenobiology lab. There was some nerd in there with glasses on because he was going on and on about something nerdy.
And that didn't look like a Starfleet Academy approved haircut, that kid, that mop he had on his head. Ugh.
But he had glasses on because he wanted to make him look like a nerd.
Yeah.
And Holly Hunter's character, the same thing. And then there was a scene where they showed, I think all the cadets were lined up for some reason. And in the front, there was somebody in a wheelchair. And I had trouble with that with the Discovery era when they had a guy in a wheelchair. Because it's like, wouldn't you have artificial legs and stuff? In Discovery's time, you could say maybe, maybe not. But in the 32nd, 33rd century, you don't have artificial limbs you could give somebody so they could stand or...
Well, wouldn't you have something more like a hover chair that wouldn't look like a traditional wheelchair like we have now? Like, can you imagine this is like the 33rd century or whatever it is, and you're still wheeling yourself around with your hands on your wheels? I mean, are you kidding me? You know, like you just said, they've got place-to-place transport now, which is ridiculous in and of itself. But you have that in the same episode where the technology for people who can't walk is a wheelchair from the 21st century. Are you kidding me?
This is clearly in the Discovery timeline. I do not understand it. Discovery is one of the least popular shows that Kurtzman has done. And they doubled down, actually tripled down, because Section 31 was set in the Discovery universe. Technically, Strange New World is also set in the Discovery universe, but they kind of hand-waved over that, and after they mentioned them initially, they kind of just forget about them. And now you've got this set in the Star Trek Discovery universe.
Complete with uneven hemlines on the uniforms.
Yeah, those stupid uniforms where, you know, normally you get it tailored like that, and you take it back and say, fix this. And at first I was thinking, okay, when Michael Burnham went into the future, and I thought this was going to be a Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda with Dylan Hunt trying to piece together the Commonwealth. And this second episode that had the Betazoids, that reminded me at least of two episodes. One episode from season 1 of Andromeda, and then there was a second episode that's not important. And that wouldn't have been a bad thing if they would have actually taken that and done something with that. Because again, I get this story here that with Starfleet Academy, it really is like when Dylan Hunt was trying to piece together the Commonwealth, and he was trying to get the old member worlds back together if he could, or find new worlds. This was the same type of story, except they're not doing anything useful with it. I don't even know what a psionic barrier is. Does it make the planet invisible? Is there some psychic shield so you can't break through the wall? What the heck is that?
I have no idea.
Because if it's some sort of wall, how are you maintaining that? Do you have people who rotate 24 hours or on the clock in these Charles Xavier Cerebro helmets that are like constantly keeping their psychic energy going to keep people out? How does that even work? That sounds silly to me.
And how did She-Hulk get beyond it then? To get to Goja 5?
Well, she's She-Hulk. She just punched through it. She got angry and punched through it.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't even touched on the holographic infant called Sam. I was very nervous about that character when I heard her introduced, because they haven't quite gone that far yet, but they're tiptoeing on some horrible stereotypes with Sam if they don't watch themselves.
Lenny?
And among other things.
I'll just leave it there. If you know, you know.
I don't understand why they're even making this series other than this is Alex Kurtzman's last hurrah. If anybody has been following our channel for a couple of weeks now, we finished up Stranger Things. And they released, I think it was last week, a video of behind the scenes of filming season 5 of Stranger Things. And what you found out in that documentary they released, and they released it, Netflix released this, is it showed the creators of the show, the writers, creators of the show, the Duffer Brothers, did not have a plan, did not know what they were doing, showed up in the final episode without scripts ready. Actors were having to correct them, going, well, so-and-so doesn't know that we're in a relationship yet, so they probably shouldn't see me doing this. And the Duffer Brothers like, oh, okay. And I just wonder, not a ready room type behind the scenes, but I just wonder if they actually had a proper behind the scenes for all this secret hideout crap, if it wouldn't be very similar to what we watched with that Netflix behind the scenes special.
I think it would be worse. Because think about what happened to Walter Mosley with Discovery. He used a word that they didn't like in describing what a cop said to him, his own personal experience of racism, and they chased him out of the writer's room because he used no-no language. Can you imagine what the behind the scenes must be like working on these horrible shows? And then there were those allegations of abuse in the writer's room, and just the whole thing sounds like it was a nightmarish experience.
So they don't even want input from people who could actually write what he understands. Because at the end of the day, what is happening is you're hiring writers to write stuff that they do not have personal experience. So they're trying to write, they're fabricating out of thin air, not just writing, but the experiences of what a person would think in that situation, because they don't have the lived experience to actually back that up. And so what you're getting is privileged California writing to try to fill in for what they should be covering.
Yeah, you can't write something that you don't understand. You have to be able to understand something first to be able to give it its due in writing it. You can't pretend like you empathize with a situation and it's going to come off as preachy, it's going to come off as condescending, it's going to come off, honestly, kind of not nice if you try to do that. Like, pretend like you understand somebody's situation and then write some fluff piece about it, and it's just appallingly offensive. And that's how a lot of this stuff comes across. That's been going on since New Trek started. Absolutely offensive.
And they could, at any time, bring on people that actually have that lived experience, like Walter Mosley.
Yeah.
If you want to write a story about racial injustice, why don't you bring in Walter Mosley like you did and let him write the story?
No, they don't want voices like that because, again, he's not following the rules. He's not controlled. It's really bizarre how you're allowed to have opinions as long as they follow the guidelines. As soon as you use a word that's not on the approved list of words, even though it was something that was used on you, you're not allowed to say it, and that just makes it so much worse.
Because they tattled the HR and got him fired.
Yeah.
And that's how they treat bringing people in. They knew enough to bring somebody in who could write that material, and then they didn't like what he was doing because it offended them. The material is offensive. That's the whole point behind it and why you don't understand it. And then they fired him because he was actually giving his experience.
Yeah.
All this stuff that they're writing, it feels so pretentious and shallow. You can tell they're not teaching you anything when you're watching the show. It's just a bunch of privileged people writing their imaginations of what something might be like. They're so out of touch.
Yeah, it's terrible.
2 seasons of this. We got this season, and I think they filmed it back to back. They're doing a second season.
Yes.
And I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, because whenever I say this, people always defend in the comments. Skydance is going to be held on the hook for this if all that stuff goes through, because they're still allowing this to happen. They're still allowing this to happen. When is season 2 of Starfleet Academy coming out? 2027? 2028?
I don't know.
It's still going to be crap Star Trek. And at this point, Molly or myself might give a new Star Trek a chance under new ownership because we're in the know.
Yeah.
But they have poisoned mainstream. Mainstreams aren't going to give Star Trek a chance again. They're going to say, oh, it's that crap series that doesn't know what they're talking about. It's science fiction only in the real basic sense of it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, that first episode was available for free on YouTube, but then you would have to pay for the second episode. Imagine you saw the potential in that first episode, because about 20 minutes of it, I'd say there was. But then you pay for episode 2, and it's that horrible piece of crap with all that jokey crap that falls flat. Can you imagine how pissed off you'd be?
Yeah, especially if you signed up to Paramount Plus and you had to pay a month subscription for that.
Yeah.
Because that first one, it is on YouTube. I recommend go ahead to YouTube and watch it. You're on YouTube now, but do a search on that. You can watch episode 1. It's not perfect. It's got loads and loads and loads of problems. I'm not defending it. It doesn't even feel like Star Trek. But the Holly Hunter and Caleb scenes at the very beginning, after the sentencing and he gets away, when she picks him up from the prison planet, and then the very ending scene where Caleb's in her office and they're talking. Watch those scenes and tell me there's not at least a little bit there that you could have worked with. Tell me Caleb isn't even just a little bit likable, especially in that ending scene. Because I think he was. I think they could have done something. And yeah, then you go into episode 2, and it's the same old crap. If you've seen Secret Hideout Star Trek, you've seen episode 2 of this.
Yeah, you've got Caleb complaining that even the replicators are out to get him because they gave him ice-cold soup. And Holly Hunter points out well, it was gazpacho. It's supposed to be cold.
That was stolen from Red Dwarf.
Yeah,
that joke,
yeah.
Everybody knows that joke from Red Dwarf. They stole it from Red Dwarf.
I turned to the old man and I'm like, is he supposed to be Arnold Rimmer now? What is this? So they took him and they made him into a joke. So yeah, I saw what you saw in the first episode. There was potential there, but in episode 2, it just completely, they flushed that straight down the toilet. And it's just, I don't know what episode 3 is going to hold. I don't know if that's going to be the same jokey stuff with they're trying to be serious sometimes and it just all falls flat, or are they going to be trying to go for the more serious stuff?
Well, my worry is this episode, episode 2, was a Caleb-centric episode. Episode 3 might center on one of those horrible characters that we probably don't want to be centering on.
Oh, I hope it's not the Sam.
Well, Sam, I mean, I don't know enough about that Genesis character. That's the cadet you saw in the trailers that said, I want to be a captain.
She's the Admiral's daughter.
So we don't know yet if her character's trash or not, but there was this cringy scene where she walked in on Caleb and of course, he's a super hacker. He was hacking in to Starfleet to look up something, and she was playing this little flirty game.
Oh, that's when he was sending that message to his mom.
And I don't know if she's going to be a bad character, but they had this like flirty romance. They had like this silhouette shadow scene thing when they were talking, and I was like cringing. I
think she's supposed to be the love interest for Darum, his roommate. And Caleb is supposed to be the love interest for Tamira, the Betazoid.
Because what these characters reminded me of, that episode 2, in TNG, there was that second season episode, I think it was called The Dolphin, and it's when the shapeshifters came on board, but you didn't know they were shapeshifters, and the young female shapeshifter was kind of having a crush on Wesley Crusher. So this episode felt like that. And then that Genesis character reminded me of that first season TNG episode. Remember that female character when Wesley was at the Starfleet Academy exams and you had that spunky female that was trying to take the exams and she was struggling a little bit, but she reminds me a lot of how the Genesis character is being played right now. I'm not saying that is a ripoff. It's just that's what it reminded me of. And between that and I've made some connections with Andromeda. I've mentioned this before with Discovery when they got their new uniforms, but the uniforms on these kids, the cadets, look like the uniforms from Crusade, the Babylon 5 spinoff. They look to me like those same uniforms. Are they? I don't know. I mean, maybe I've just lived so long that I'm always able to point out where things look like they're from, but this felt stale. It felt old. It felt recycled. And if they're aiming, because I'm convinced the audience they're aiming for based on the material in episode 2 is for tween privileged females. That's what I think this is aiming for. And I got news for them. There's not enough privileged females out there, tweens, to watch this show. So I don't know how this show is going to survive. I have no idea, but the characters, there's nothing here that I could see would appeal to a young male at all. Like, at all. But I'm not an alpha or a Gen Z, so I don't know. Maybe these type of characters do appeal to you. I don't know. Maybe they'll develop that Klingon character, the cadet. Maybe they'll develop him a little bit where somebody might care about him in that demographic. I don't know. But as it is now, it's like, that guy was so forgettable. They were online, people were building up the hype about this guy and how he was just an abomination to this and that. He was nothing. Like, this guy was nothing. He meant nothing in these first 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this turned out to be exactly what we expected. But episode 1, there were pieces, there were elements. They must have tried really hard, got into a room together, and wrote a few scenes that actually strung together. Episode 1 had potential to maybe turn into something. So my recommendation would be, as long as you're not expecting Star Trek, because you're not going to get Star Trek, watch the free episode 1. There's bits and pieces that aren't horrible, but once they get on the Athena, which is like, 20 minutes in, man, it gets bad until like the very end, like the very last scene. So like watch up until they get to the USS Athena and then skip to the end of the last scene where Holly Hunter's in her, I think her quarters with that fireplace, that virtual fireplace. And that last scene, if you just watch the beginning and then the very end, you might know what we're talking about here. But when I say beginning, watch after Paul Giamatti is taken off to jail and after the sentencing happens.
Yeah, pick up where it says 15 years later.
Yeah, from 15 years later to right before they go on the USS Athena, there's a window there where it's got some potential, and then jump right to the last scene of episode 1. And I think you'll see potential there. The Caleb character in that last scene was actually likable. They were kind of building a kind of a surrogate mother-son type, because she talked about how she also had a son, and Caleb was saying, well, I'm not him. And she's like, I'm aware. But they were forming this bond here. It kind of reminded me of like Sequest, where you had Bridger, who also lost a son. And so he was bonding with Lucas as like a surrogate son. And Lucas's father was not a nice person, unavailable. So Lucas was bonding with Bridger. And that's the same kind of dynamic they were kind of building with Caleb and Holly Hunter's character. But it went away in episode 2.
Well, and where's Caleb's dad? Who is Caleb's dad? Why is he an orphan? Where'd Daddy go? So there were questions that were left unanswered. Apparently he doesn't care about his dad. He just wants to find his mom.
This show isn't very good. So at least from my review, it's definitely not Star Trek. But it's also not as bad so far as Section 31. So take that as a positive review.
As dumb as this is, honestly, I'm just going to say, I think this, to me, is the best of the live-action new Trek. And I'm including Picard in that, because I didn't like the character assassination that occurred throughout, well, obviously, Season 3 I didn't like, because they brought back all those old characters and had them behaving horribly. But even before that, they killed Picard off in the first season.
He's a robot now.
Yeah. So, there was so much wrong with Picard just because of the assassination of old characters that I hated. But at least this isn't really assassinating old characters. Yeah, Jet Reno is there, which is annoying because I didn't care for her character on Discovery. So that's a reminder of Discovery. We haven't seen Tilly yet. So at least that's something. But she was on that red carpet thing, so we saw that she will be in this at some point.
Strange New Worlds, some people say, is good.
It's not.
At the very beginning, there was hope that they would do something with Pike, but the running joke that he's just kitchen help now, he's essentially Neelix, except Neelix is cooler than Pike.
And what they did to Spock.
Yeah. Strange New Worlds, I don't know why people like that show, but I agree with you. At least here, they're not taking a Pike or a Spock and just completely twisting them, bringing Scotty in. They're not doing any of that. The worst you got is Robert Picardo. And honestly, he's playing the Doctor pretty close to what he did before. It's just, they're not utilizing him in anything that I would consider to be good.
No, not in a useful way.
Oh my gosh, that opera scene was so cringy. If I was Robert Picardo, I'd be so embarrassed about that.
He's getting a paycheck. Maybe he needs it. I don't know.
Anyway, that's all I have to say about this show.
Least awful is a new Trek, but, at least the live action, because Prodigy was better than this.
Yeah. Of the new Treks, I think we both agree Prodigy is the best of the new Treks.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched Prodigy, again, I don't know how Star Trek-y it feels. You have Janeway on there, but for a kid's show, Prodigy, the first season, because we didn't quite get through that second season, but that first season is not horrible. But then I look at that main character in Prodigy, and he kind of feels like Caleb.
Sure does.
That kid in Prodigy, I think, was from a slave mine or something, and look where Caleb came from. And then Janeway you could argue that's the same character as Raising Arizona.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities to some of these characters. Like I said, Lower Decks, Prodigy, squish it together, make a live-action show, and that's what you're getting.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know what? If you don't watch this, you're not missing anything. If you do watch it, you'll probably turn it off and be like, oh, that wasn't for me. So, we're going to do the rest of the season, obviously. But I have no idea what to expect in this third episode. No idea, because these first 2 episodes were so very different from each other as far as seriousness and what was supposed to be comedic. I don't know. I really don't know where this goes from here, but I guess we'll find out next week. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments below, and
take care.